Now that Blizzard has officially announced Hardcore Realms, I wanted to take the time to give you guys as many advanced tips that I can for making sure that you survive in Hardcore. I'm sure on YouTube you guys have seen hundreds, if not thousands of death clips lately, and if you want to make it up to level 60 yourself, which I think is something like less than 1% of people do on their first try, then you're absolutely going to want to know all of these tips. And these won't be your basic tips. Hopefully everyone can learn something here today. I'll have more guides going over things like Hearthstone batching, logout skips, and more coming soon. But real quick before we start, I do want to say if you do want help making it to level 60, if you want the easiest guide that will tell you every mob that's terrifying, it'll notify you when you're near a quest that you shouldn't be doing, and it'll give you a huge arrow on your screen that'll tell you exactly where to go to help you level up as fast and as safe as possible, then make sure you check out the new Rested XP Hardcore guide that you can pre-order with the link in the description and the pinned comment, but you can also just use code Sarthe at checkout for a discount for yourselves, and you'll probably notice that pretty much everyone leveling up during Hardcore will be using this guide. The first tip is to completely understand leashing. Leashing is essentially running away from enemies so that they go back to wherever they were before you started attacking them. This is a very oversimplified way of saying it, but anytime you use any hostile abilities, you will reset that leash. So mobs have a very specific timer on how long they will chase you. A generic equation for how long each mob will have a leash timer for is about 9 seconds plus 1 second for every 10 levels. That means at level 60, you will have a 15-second leash timer. I would almost always suggest getting used to a 15-second leash timer, but if the mob can spawn at a lower level below any of the 10 level bracket, like level 29, it doesn't matter what level the mob you're fighting is, it will always have the leash timer of a level 29 mob. And it's not just attacking that will reset leash timers. If a mob stands still and it melees you, then it will also reset the leash timer, or if you do any sort of CC. So if you try to stand still to heal and it hits you when you had almost completed that leash timer, then you will actually completely reset it, and it would have been more worth it to continue running away. This also means that enemies with faster attack speeds, like dual wielding enemies or a cat, will reset their leash from standing still a lot faster. It's important to note that if there's more than one player near you, or a pet or anything like that, then every single one of those players or pets will all have their very own leash timer, and leashes are queued. So when your leash ends, then the next leash timer is just starting. You can actually take advantage of this as a pet class. And that's how some hunters can safely solo mobs that are over 10 levels higher than them. To do this, get both yourself and your pet on the aggro table. Then you're gonna start kiting away as the mob is chasing you. Set your pet on stay, but don't run too far from it that the pet will despawn before the leash actually ends. Then the mob will run back to your pet starting its leash. And you can do this indefinitely. Pull aggro again and then just keep doing this over and over again, and you'll never die. Understanding leashing leads us into our second tip, which is going to be learning how to split pull mobs. Every mob does a hidden cry for help after around a half second when it's pulled. If this happens, all of the mob's leashes will be completely chained. That means every single mob that was pulled this way will have the exact same leash, and they will all reset if you releash any of them. This can be circumvented by split pulling. If you use an AoE ability, body pull, or attack all of the mobs before they do this cry for help, then they will all have their own individual leash timer. This is how you can pull a quest mob or just pick out one mob from a giant pack. Grenades are phenomenal for this, and engineering is an amazing profession for everyone doing hardcore, but there's also some quest items that act as grenades or AoE that can be useful for doing this as well. Now that you understand pulling, it's time to get really good at kiting. Everyone can kite, not just hunters. What you want to use is the terrain around you. Abusing pathing to kite mobs indefinitely can help almost anyone kill pretty much every elite in the game. And this can range from jumping over fences, which always makes mobs take the long way around, or kiting around a giant tree. This will basically make sure that mobs never reach you. There's other ways of utilizing this, but for the scope of this video, I'll let you discover it for yourselves. And on the note of using terrain, you can almost always LOS casters to pretty much take 0 damage from them. Caster mobs in Hardcore Classic are extremely dangerous because they do insane amounts of damage, but if you're tracking their cast times, you can basically just dip behind a wall and then come back out every time they're about to get their cast off, and you'll never take any damage, and also they'll never melee you because they're continuing to try to cast. The next tip is to understand evade spots. There's a ton of evade spots throughout World of Warcraft Classic. A lot of times they're up on little ledges or up on a rock. You can just wait a few seconds here, everything will reset, and you'll be completely safe. Every dungeon has some unique evade spots, so knowing them all can be extremely useful, but as a general rule of thumb, if a mob can't reach you, it should evade. If it can't path up to that location, it almost always will evade. Do know though, if you are still in line of sight of casters, they can always still cast at you and they will kill you. They won't reset, they'll just continue casting. So just make sure you LOS casters if you run to an evade spot. The next advanced tip is to never enter caves. Just kidding. Literally everyone that ever plays hardcore knows this. But what you do want to do is track respawns. It doesn't matter where you are out in the world. If you've killed every mob in an area, you should be tracking the respawns of where was the mobs you killed first. If you're tracking respawns and you notice something is back up behind you, then that means everything else is gonna start respawning soon. So it's basically a good sign to GTFO. Also, some locations, like a lot of null camps, are tethered respawns, which is a little bit weird, but everything will respawn at the exact same time. Just stay cautious of this. And on that note, you should absolutely know your exit. Always have an exit plan for every single situation you're in. It doesn't matter where you are out in the world. If you accidentally pull too much and start running in a random direction, you might continue pulling mobs. So the best way to do this is have your head on a swivel, always be looking around, and make a mental note of your spatial awareness. And that's the main reason why caves are so dangerous, because everything will respawn behind you and there's only generally one exit strategy. It's basically just one path out. There's a lot of fortresses in the open world that are just like this, so always know your exit plan. As a quick one, you should know that in classic WoW, there is a Z-axis. Basically, mobs can hit you vertically even if you can't hit them. What this means, if you're ever on stairs, in a tower, a fortress, or in water, if there's anything above or below you, it will be able to melee you even if it's completely out of range. This can absolutely get you killed. You need to be at least 5 yards away from where the mob is. So if you're ever going to enter into a pirate ship, or if you're fighting mobs underwater, no, they can still hit you even though you can't hit them. And lastly, don't freak out. This is such a massively understated tip, but after you've spent countless hours, days, if not weeks worth of playtime on your character, you're extremely invested. And when things go wrong, hardcore players, or anyone in fact, has a tendency to freak out and not do what they need to be doing. This ranges from things like forgetting to hit your oh shit button, like a paladin that's taking a ton of damage and forgetting to bubble. These deaths happen all the time. Also, if you have Light of a Loon, if you're Alliance, everybody has a get out of jail free card. You should absolutely be using this. There are so many deaths that happen where people could have easily outplayed the situation when things started going wrong. It's actually human psychology. In the army, they train you to be in dangerous situations so that whenever things go wrong, your body will instantly react. And that's kind of what you're gonna wanna do in hardcore as well. This can mean having a uniform keybind on all your characters for basically every defensive CD, everything that can save you in weird situations. Like I have Shift 4 for my lips, which means if I accidentally DC'd and fell off of something like a griffin, which should be fixed on the hardcore realms, then I would never actually have to freak out and not know where this button was. Every single time I would just press Shift 4 before I landed and I would take 0 damage from hitting the ground. Remember, hardcore is about knowledge. Sometimes you can get lucky in terrifying situations, but if you're always preparing for the worst, you'll never be caught off guard and you'll always be able to protect your character. One more time, if you want to make it to 60 on your first try and want help with a leveling guide, I would highly suggest checking out Rested XP. You can click the link in the description or just use code Sarthe at checkout, but this is an extremely useful and reliable add-on that will help you so much on your journey in hardcore. Anyways, guys, I'm working on some really in-depth class guides with players that have made it up to 60 on each class multiple times. So if you want to stay tuned for that, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all on the next one.